your attention to housekeeping matters. The session will be recorded and be available on our respective media shortly afterwards. Questions from the audience are welcomed. Simply lodge them by accessing into the chat box at the base of your screen. Liz Whitehouse is the Managing Director of Africa House, and I'm most pleased to have arrived at this moment to have Liz speak to us about their range of service offerings. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you very much, Duncan, and good morning, good evening to the audience, wherever you may be. It's lovely to have you, and it's lovely to get this opportunity to address you. I'll just go through a couple of slides on Africa House. I'll try not to be too boring, and then we can, as Duncan says, we'll move on to the panel. So just starting off who we are. So Africa House is, it's a merger between two companies, being Whitehouse and Associates and Africa Project Access. Both companies have been operating in the African trade and project environment for more than 20 years. We work exclusively in sub-Saharan Africa, and we offer insight and access into African trade and project environment through the provision of intelligence on projects, bespoke research, and on the expansion of opportunities in growing markets. Thank you. Next slide. What makes it, I'm often asked, what makes you different from all these other African consultancies? I suppose there's three real key reasons. The first is that we are African. We are based in South Africa, and we have a passion for understanding and interpreting this complex and this rapidly changing continent on which we live. We're firmly rooted in the African market, and we've been assisting companies develop insight into markets in sub-Saharan Africa for over 23 years at Africa House. Between the Africa House team, we have well over 60 years of research experience on the continent, and we've traveled to 40 African countries. This translates into a very unique insight and also into a connectivity. There's not many countries on this continent where we can't actually pick up a phone and get in touch with someone to give us insights into what's going on and to answer a question. We've developed this really intimate first-hand knowledge of key markets, which allows us to understand what is driving them and to be able to translate that into opportunities for our client base. The third thing is that interacting with companies across multiple sectors means that we're able to understand markets from multiple dimensions and the interconnectivity between companies, between sectors, and between markets. So I think one of our key strengths is being able to network our clients with opportunities, with potential partners, and with each other, so that for mutual benefit. Next slide. That really just sums up our service offering. There's really four key pillars to what we do. All underpinned by this bespoke research. We started off as a research company, and really that is our key strength is this bespoke research capability that we have. And then we have our subscription service, which is central to it. We have an inward missions program that we run, and then group visits. And I'll just briefly go through each of those. Next slide. Okay. So the Africa House subscription service, we currently have over 150 corporate subscribers to our services. And really there's three things that we do. We provide early alerts on greenfield and brownfield projects in sub-Saharan Africa. We provide networking opportunities for our clients, and we aim to keep them up to date with trends and developments and opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide. So what do you get if you subscribe to Africa House? First off, you get access to our project platform, and I'll take you through a little bit of that just now. And this project platform, we continually update and we add projects. At the moment, we have over 6,500 projects on the platform. We cover the 49 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and we look at 13 sectors across those countries. So it's a strategic tool that allows companies to manage all aspects of project identification, tracking, sharing, and management. And just to give you an example of activity, in 2021, we added over 1,800 projects, and we updated close to 4,000 projects on that platform. So that's the core that is central to the subscription service. The second thing we do is we provide access through networking events and learning opportunities. Through this annual program, we have what we call focus groups. We have sector focus groups and country focus groups. We host about 30 odd focus groups in a year, which allow subscribers to engage with over 100 expert presenters. During 2021, we hosted 32 focus groups, with a total of 1,350 attendees, 89 speakers from 21 countries. Certainly this COVID in a way has done us a favor because it really has allowed us to expand the offering in our focus groups. We pivoted very quickly into a virtual format, into webinars. And what that's done is it's allowed us to get speakers from anywhere to dial into our webinars, to talk to our clients. And it's also allowed certainly subscribers who are sitting in perhaps Australia to be able to dial in, because obviously we record them and they're available to our subscribers afterwards through our website. So that really has, so as I said, that's been an improvement on our service. And then the third thing that our subscribers get is, and this is in terms of keeping people up to date, we have a weekly and monthly publications that just really ensure our clients remain informed, and they just cover important project developments or trends in sub-Saharan Africa that people need to be aware of if they're doing business on the continent. Next slide. Okay, just taking you through our Africa House project platform. This is something that we really are very proud of. We've worked on it over a number of years. It's hosted on a server in the Middle East through our partners, Ventures Middle East. And it really is a remarkable resource. So all the projects are hosted in there. It has a very good search function. So you can search by country, by industry, by name of project. You could do it by stage in the project cycle. It really is very functional in that regard. And then next slide. So once you've clicked on a project, just to give you an example of the sort of things you'll find there. So this is the total Telenga oil development in Uganda. It gives you things like project status, the value, and it gives you what we started adding here as well as supporting documents. So, and this is the Telenga project at the moment is a very hot project. There's a lot going on. So when we're finding requests for information or letters of award, that sort of stuff, we're putting them up as supporting documents for our clients. Next slide. Okay, so this is it didn't fit onto one slide. So this is the second part of it. So in addition to that, we have the scope. It gives you exactly what's going on in the project. And then we have a timeline. And these are just short little bits and pieces that are continually updating those projects. And then underneath it, we have the companies and roles. And we list all the companies and government departments, financiers or whatever who are linked to that project. And we have the full contact details there available to our clients. I think what makes this database really is incredible, and it has a lot of functionality involved. So you can share notes with your colleagues who also have access to the system on things. You can set reminders to view projects at a later stage. You can tag projects and you can follow projects. So whenever we do a timeline update, we will just tag at the back, notify people who are interested in this project, and it will automatically send you an email to say there's been activity on this project. And associated with it as well as we have what we call a lead management system, which is basically a customized customer relationship management system for projects. And it's completely confidential to a subscriber. Not even Africa House can dial into your lead management system. And it allows you to manage project leads around certain projects within your company, within people who have access to that system in your company. I suppose the other important thing for me is that you can always raise a query, and I think this makes it different to other project databases. So if you are on the Telenga project and you have a query about the Ugandan National Oil Company, the first contact there, you just hit query, that little button at the bottom, and you send an email through to our office to say, can you just check the email address on this, or do you have an update on the status of this project, whatever it is. So it allows you to interact with us on that basis. And then the last thing, can we just move next one? So it also allows you to generate statistics on projects, and our clients find this very useful for strategic presentations that they're required to do to their board or whatever. It allows you to look at how many projects are being awarded annually, the value. You can look at it by country, you can look at it by sector. There's various ways you can slice and dice this information. So that is another useful feature. And I think that the last feature I'd like to just highlight here is that all those contacts that you see below projects, they all go into a company's database. So we have this database, this incredible database that sits behind this that you can mine in terms of companies that are active, companies and organizations that are active in doing projects in Africa. Yes, and the other thing I forgot to answer is this is all available on a mobile app. So once you have access to that, you can get it on your phone, and you can literally, wherever you go, you have access to it. And if you were, say, sitting in Nairobi, all these projects are geotagged, you could say, I'm here, and it'll give you an idea of exactly what projects are active around you. So just, yeah, people always say, again, how is this different? There are a number of project platforms out there, and people always want to know why the Africa House one is different. I think it's been built and developed over many years, this project system, and we go back to 2014 on that, which is when we started putting it onto the venture system. We don't rely on a single source of project information. We have various sources of information. We have in-country partners. So it really is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle in terms of the project information we have there. As I've said, we have this lead management system, which I think is quite unique, and the ability to do queries, this interactive nature of it, where you can request further detail or updates. The Africa House team, prior to COVID, we traveled extensively, and we actively searched for project intelligence while we're in market. Since COVID, we have started appointing partners in certain key markets who are then feeding that information through to us as well. And as I mentioned, this whole underpinning everything is the solid research capability. So if there is a specific project that is of interest, and we do this to some of our clients, they say, this is one that we really need to get to the bottom of, and they will just, we will then undertake a bespoke research assignment for them to really, really dig deep into that opportunity and understand how they can take advantage of it. Next one. Okay, next. So the group visit program that we had came to a spectacular halt in March 2020 as a result of COVID. But up until then, we've had this incredible group visit program. You can see from that map, we have done most countries in Southern, East, Central Africa, and certainly a few select markets in West Africa. Our group visit program is very targeted. It's not like Chamber of Commerce visits. It really is around specific opportunities or areas of exponential growth. So Mozambique is a very good example. The oil and gas projects in northern Mozambique and Palma, we took a visit to Maputo specifically to see those sort of head offices, government departments responsible for that project. Then we went up to Pemba Palma, which visited the project site, really trying to understand it there. And then we actually took a group through to Milan to meet with the EPC contractor. So looking at it from all angles, but all specifically around that project. Same with Cameroon, we took a group through there specifically to look at the port of Kribi when it was being developed and understand exactly what that development, what the opportunities were on that development. So very focused, very specific. And we are going to resume this year. And there's two that we're looking at specifically. One would be Uganda around the Total Telenga project, and ECOP, which is the pipeline going through to Tanzania. And the second one would be Namibia. Namibia it's very interesting from this tiny sleepy country on the west coast. It's really is on the cusp of potentially being a major energy player in Africa. Shell has made a sizable oil discovery offshore, and then there's this whole green hydrogen opportunity that is developing there. So that is one thing that is certainly of great interest to us to understand how that will play out, and we're hoping to take a visit through there. Next one. Next, yeah. So, and just quickly on the research side, I mean, the research we do, it's not academic in that it's, you know, sort of looking at the economy and the political side of things. Ours is far more practical in its approach. So we would look at market rankings. If you look at the whole of Africa, it's a very big place. Companies often don't know where to target markets. We also look at market entry strategies for people and market feasibility. So really at the end of our research projects would aim to provide a client with a specific roadmap to be able to enter a market. So it would say, these are your competitors, this is your route to market, these are your best potential partners, this is the regulatory environment, a very practical approach, and it's completely tailored specific to a client requirement. Next slide. And then last is our inward mission program. We have a very successful B2B program, which we've run throughout the years. And obviously with COVID as well, we pivoted that very, very quickly onto virtual events. And hopefully this year we'll be able to go back again. In fact, we're working on 2 proposals at the moment, which is very exciting for inward missions again. So delegations actually physically coming through to Johannesburg for events. Next slide. Yeah, and that'll just give you, so in 2021, you'll see we did 9 virtual B2B events across a number of sectors, 207 participating foreign companies, and 817 meetings that we actually scheduled during those events. So that's an opportunity for our clients as well to be able to introduce them not only to kind of this African project environment, but certainly to bring them into this B2B environment and introduce them to Turkish, Brazilian companies, Spanish companies, whoever who are interested in doing business on the continent. Next slide. Okay, thank you. And that really does sum up Africa House in a short and hopefully not too dull manner. But yeah, we look forward to helping you grow your business in Africa as Africa House. Just in terms of the project platform, I just want to mention that is one thing that we're looking at introducing to the Australian market through the Australia-Africa Chamber of Commerce. And we are in discussions with Duncan on this because I think that it's an incredibly valuable tool and will add a lot of benefit to a company's business. So that's just something to flag, to keep an eye out for going forward. Thank you.
Liz, thank you for that. And it's a very rich cake that you've given to us today. I really have appreciated it. I think your presentation and the opportunity it presents for us to work with you is simply very exciting. And we look forward to delivering on our promise to do so. And there'll be certainly a lot more coming out of our media to promote exactly what you've been talking about. It's very exciting. We should now move nonetheless to our panel, which has been assembled to take this on the questions. And Liz, I think you were going to do the initial introductions here.
Yep, we do. Hi. I believe that Jason is on online. Hi, Jason. Hi. Good. Thank you very much. Just to introduce the panel from my side. So we're very lucky to have Jason van der Poel with us. Jason is a partner with one of South Africa's biggest law firms, Wentzel Linklaters. He has expertise, numerous years expertise in all aspects of project finance. He's advised lenders, sponsors, contractors on a wide range of financing options, including public-private partnerships, construction and operations contracts, and power purchase agreements. So we're very happy to have him with us on our panel. We also have Duncan Bonnet, who is the Director of Market Access and Research at Africa House. Duncan has been my business partner and has been with the company since its inception in 1998. And he's advised both corporate and government clients on opportunities in the region, the changing nature of Africa and how best to access these opportunities. This has taken Duncan to over 30 countries on assignment regionally and globally in a variety of fields. So he really does have an in-depth knowledge of this continent and business on the continent. Thank you, Duncan.
And just if I may introduce Hugh Morgan. Hugh is, of course, a very distinguished Australian businessman. He was formerly the chief executive of Western Mining Limited, which was ultimately absorbed by BHP in a multi-billion-dollar takeover. He's been a board of the Reserve Bank of Australia, chairman of the World Gold Council, executive board of CSIRO, a whole lot of other major senior roles. And as such, we're delighted to have you with us today too, Hugh. But I should add, by the way, Hugh has got his own very direct investments in Nigeria, which is causing him a lot of challenges.
Good. Thanks, Duncan. So who's going to run the panel? Liz, over to you. Okay,
all right, let me start. I'll start, thank you very much. And we're looking at Africa 2022, where the continent is heading. So Duncan, I think I'll start with you on this one. Duncan, I know that one of the key trends that we're picking up from our clients and from our research across the continent is this rapid urbanization of African populations. The continent's population is projected to double between now and 2050. And 2/3 of this growth will be absorbed by urban areas, which, according in the next 30 years, will become home to an additional 95 million people, which is a fairly staggering statistic. So I'd like to ask you really, what do you see as driving this trend? What does it entail, and how can Australian companies benefit from this?
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, I think if you look at urbanization in Africa, people talk about the demographic dividend. It's only a dividend if it is properly understood and if people benefit from it. So we are seeing at the moment the incredible growth of urban areas. It's not just migration from rural areas, it's internal growth within cities. If we look back at the turn of the century, there were only around 30 cities in Africa with a population of 1 million or more. By the end of this decade, there'll be close to 100 cities with 1 million people or more in them, and probably another 250 cities with 500,000 people or more. So you've got this massive growth of urban areas. What do you need to ensure? You obviously need to ensure that people have places to live. They need water and sanitation. They need all of those sort of social services, power, energy, education, as well as ensuring food chains. As your population in urban areas grow, they have to be fed. And increasingly, those requirements will be met domestically from within Africa, but it's then ensuring things like cold chains are maintained, infrastructure is maintained. All of those sort of farm to fork industries, which are critical to ensuring that Africa is able to develop and sustain itself, need to be maintained. So I think the opportunity from an Australian perspective, obviously, is a lot of the technologies that you have and the experience that you have from in the agricultural sector, the broader sector, from sort of farm to fork, as well as areas around urban development, how best to unlock urban developments, particularly sometimes in water scarce areas or areas where resources are not as available as you might want them to be. And then education. Obviously, Australia has a lot of experience in that, particularly things like distance education and practical education experience. So I think the urban environment in Africa is one that is of major importance, and it's a very exciting opportunity for companies that provide either goods or services, and that the services go all the way through from consulting engineering through the contracting sides of the business. So architecture, design, that kind of thing, urban planning. And so I think that from our perspective, what we see is that urbanization really is probably one of the top 3 or 4 drivers of growth across the African continent at the moment.
Liz, could I ask Jason a question then? In terms of respect of that, what do you see as the relationship between just a trading relationship and the engagement of equity within the operations? In other words, to have people dedicate themselves for just opening a services office, presumably they might own the office, but in terms of harnessing some of the growth reward from that is a question of investment. And in some countries, what I find in Africa is there's only a limited number of them in which we have a double taxation agreement, which actually inhibits, I think, some country direct investment, other than if they then work through a UK subsidiary, because there's a double taxation agreement more with European countries. It depends where they come from, what their history is. And Australia tends to have a double taxation agreement with them. That's with whether it's France or whether it's with the UK. So it's actually engaging the framework for encouraging some investment with trade on its own.
Hugh, could I just check, is that question directed to me?
Oh, well, I don't mind who actually. I think Jason, I mean, you're responsible to Jason,
yeah.
But Duncan, if you feel that you can respond to an observation, I think that'd be welcomed.
If it was a question for Duncan, Duncan, happy for you to go ahead.
No, Jason, it's all yours. I think that's probably more your area of expertise than mine.
Yeah, what I can say, Hugh, is, well, I can speak to what we see coming across our desks. at a law firm based here in Johannesburg and servicing clients across the African continent that are performing these investments. I preface what I say by saying that I'm not a tax expert and haven't done an analysis of the double tax agreements between Australia and the various African countries. But what I can speak to is what we are seeing. The Africa Rising narrative was very strong until about 2015 across the continent, and then, in a sense, faded off a little bit. And much had to do with individual countries and what was happening in those countries. In South Africa, we had an economic contraction and a difficult phase through the Zuma years with state capture and some of those things that are coming to light in some of our processes in the country. Some of our neighbors also have had some significant issues. Mozambique, for example, with the tuna boat scandal, Angola. Ethiopia was one of these economies that was really rising, and there was a lot of focus on Ethiopia as a result. And as you know, Ethiopia has also become embroiled in some internal conflict, which has really hampered its economy and economic growth. So from about 2015 onwards, it hasn't been the strongest narrative, Africa Rising, that is. But what we have seen is a lot of inward investment in a number of different pockets. So, for example, the growth in the electricity supply industry and private power linked to the mining industry, which across the continent has remained strong. And with regards to the deals that we've worked on specifically, they've included things like the oil and gas finds in northern Mozambique, with huge inward investments coming in there, and structural issues, looking at precisely your point around trade and double tax, how to structure the investment coming in, the use, for example, of Mauritian vehicles, with Mauritius having a quite favorable tax regime specifically engineered to allow it to be a platform for investment into Africa by investors from other parts of the world. So we've seen Mauritius come to the fore as a jurisdiction, as a platform. And then we've seen many businesses routing their African operations through South Africa, using Dutch holding companies, UK holding companies. And what that requires is a very sound tax analysis from your home jurisdiction, Australia, the double tax treaties, the most efficient tax structuring to minimize leakage and make sure that you've got an efficient structure on your hands. Some of the other projects that we've seen have been investment in Kenyan roads, for example, apart from mining operations in different parts of Africa. And the electricity supply industry has been a really big focal point across the continent, from the Francophone jurisdictions, Anglophone jurisdictions, Lusophone jurisdictions. In South Africa, in particular, we're seeing a massive focus on our dysfunctional utility. And we're not alone in the context of all of our neighbors. And what that has meant is some policy reform allowing for private power production, private power sales. So a hugely and quickly growing captive power market. And then also the green hydrogen market, which is growing in this region. And also trends towards regional integration in relation to electricity supply. Again, just to answer your question directly, what we have seen in those trends is how have people invested in these things in South Africa. Often they've looked at the most efficient tax structuring and have used Mauritius as a platform, or used a combination of Dutch and South African companies as a platform into Africa. I'll stop there.
No. So could I say, just for the purpose of the conversation here, then, can you give us an idea of the logistics? In South Africa, for example, my recollection is that certainly most of the BMWs, the smaller ones that are provided to the Australian market, are built in South Africa. The presumption I have then is that there's a logistical chain there that's satisfactory to South Africa and BMW in getting the goods here. my own experience in part of South Africa, and Duncan's referred to Nigeria. Last time I tried to get 2 containers to Perth, actually, it took 4 months from the time the ship left to the time it called by Perth. So it was, logistics were somewhat difficult, if I put it that way. Maybe, you know, in terms of dealing just with trade rather than investment, is there any observation about how you see logistics? Now, I'm not referring to the present hiatus that the world's seeing in logistics. I'm just talking about let's backtrack a couple of years, say what was it like then, and what do you think it might revert to? Because if we're trading goods as distinct from money and services, then trade, the logistics is an issue between us. So just have you any observation about that?
From my side, yes, I can make observations. Duncan, were you going to proceed? Go ahead.
Jason, I'll just hop in very quickly. I think if you, from obviously, as you've mentioned, BMW, from recollection, all the right-hand drive Mercedes C-classes globally are manufactured here in South Africa as well. So from that supply chain, it's fine. What we are seeing across the continent is there is enormous investment into particularly ports, but also rail, and as well as expansion of airports, because of the understanding that logistics has always been an Achilles heel in African project development, in fact, in terms of the broader trading environment. Companies like Dubai Ports World, which is one of the big ports operators globally, is on a very aggressive expansion across Africa. They are either acquiring, in fact, they've just bought one of South Africa's key logistics companies in Imperial Logistics. They operate a number of ports across the continent, and they are building and or upgrading others to take advantage of the growing business opportunity. I do think, obviously from a perspective of Australian business into Africa, one of the things that we have seen, and I think it holds true, that going forward, we are going to require, or companies are going to require, to look more closely at setting up regional hubs within sub-Saharan Africa, or Africa as a whole, as it may be. Even in a post-COVID environment, shorter supply chains, localization, the continental free trade area, all of these things are going to encourage companies at having distribution capabilities within Africa. Sourcing out of Africa into Australia, I suppose it depends what you're looking for. The Mosel smelter in the south of Mozambique imports all of its bauxite from Australia, and they've been doing that very successfully for 20 years. They've managed to get those supply lines set up pretty well. So from that perspective, I think once you start to see more effective port operations across the continent, the likes of Bolloré Logistics, which is a French company, is a very key operator here, the likes of Dubai Ports World, AP Moller Maersk, who are investing quite heavily in the logistics infrastructure in Africa, you'll start to see improvements in those trade flows from Africa to Australia and vice versa.
Right.
Jason?
Can I just come in there, Duncan, and just underscore exactly the point you were making about the impact of the Continental Africa Free Trade Area Agreement in allowing there to be aggregation and consolidation?
Absolutely.
We've seen a couple of interesting port and rails deals in South Africa. Sorry, Hugh, just to add to what Duncan said. We've seen the Nacala Railroad and Ports project in Mozambique. We've also seen the Ghanaian deal at the port of Tema, which has been rail and port upgrades. And our own Transnet in South Africa is currently engaged in procurement, improving terminal operations at various of its ports in South Africa, Richards Bay, Durban, and some of the others. Transnet has had some of its own particular challenges in South Africa as a South African state-owned enterprise. And I think hopefully a page has been turned in terms of some of the dysfunction experienced in the last decade, and a new drive to clean the organization and make sure that it's functioning efficiently. we are seeing these procurements of port upgrades, which I interpret as a very positive sign.
Yes. So what do you see, if I can ask Jason or Duncan, in terms of what do you see as the access from Australia that would you think interest your side of the South African or the African continent side of, if you like, the interest of what we're able to provide? I expect that in the background to say, basically, let's face it, we're a high-cost industry. We're a high-cost nation. And we remarkably now have manufacturing is less than 10% of our GDP. 82% of our employment is in the service sector. Would you believe it? I mean, I can believe it because so much of it's inefficient in terms of government. But anyway, we all have those complaints. So in terms of, it's basically, as far as I can see it, it's a prospect for Australia is skills transfer. You referred education as one, for example. Mining sector, if you like, can build on the expertise that we see, in some parts of South Africa are very good and very adaptive to the situation in Africa, continental Africa generally. In terms of the export of goods, as I see that as limited. It may be high-tech goods, has an opportunity that may be more related to air transport, air logistics, rather than it's high-value transport rather than anything else. Mauritius is well represented. You mentioned Mauritius, and through the African Chamber of Commerce with Duncan, Mauritius has had plenty of opportunity to represent itself here, from my observation, as to the advantages that you've referred to about how it set itself up to try and be a gateway. And so when I say it's a gateway, these are not to dodge tax. The idea is not to be taxed twice. That's the issue. It's really a single set of taxations for a single transaction, as distinct from being stuck with double taxation. So there are some good things that are around, and we see them. I think the African Chamber of Commerce here and this relationship that's been now, in terms of the relationship that Duncan and Liz have put together, is actually a really good one. And to actually have an understanding of what it is that you've been doing in South Africa is, I must say, a stunningly good representation of what's possible to encourage people in this side of the country, particularly I'd say also out of Perth, which is very Africa centric, and because there's so many South Africans there and others. But I think there's been the material that you've presented today is very encouraging to facilitate additional representation. That's I don't want to close it off, but that's what I would see.
But can I just add to that too, Hugh, that one of the real attractions I think for Liz and her body is that we will be able to probably corral a lot of senior finance people in Australia to recognise what these opportunities are to actually support it all.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. From the perspective of looking from an African perspective, looking outwards, what we see obviously is that there's a lot of Australian mining activity in Africa, and with that comes some of the supply chains. So, I spoke to one particular Australian mining company up in the north of Mozambique, and they were very proud of the fact that they had imported everything from Australia. They told us that they weren't really sure what they could get in Mozambique, so they just shipped everything in, including the loo paper. So there is obviously that opportunity in terms of supply chains. I think if you look at, Jason mentioned the green hydrogen industry a little bit earlier. Obviously, Namibia has a $9.4 billion deal that has pretty much been closed. South Africa is looking at an industry of pretty much the same size. And then a company like Fortescue Forward Industries has signed a head with the government of the DRC to unlock a potentially $20 billion plus opportunity in that country through the Inga Falls and the development of Inga 3, 14,000 megawatts of hydropower. So I think that there are those kinds of opportunities in the resources sector. Australia obviously has a wealth of experience in terms of technology and services in the gas industry. A lot of and I think this is perhaps an opportunity to explore, if you look at the oil industry in Africa, most new developers of oil look to Scotland and the North Sea experience, and they look to an example of how to industrialize and create local value in an industry. Australia has a wealth of experience in the gas industry, and the gas industry is one that really is starting to develop very quickly across many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Tanzania, Mozambique, Senegal, Tanzania, and others. And that's something that actually could be punted as an Australia Inc. Approach to the continent, to say, look, we have this great experience, in some of it in remote locations. We know how to do this. We have the technology, we have the experience, we are able to provide. When you're doing a business in many African countries, you're not selling a product, you're selling a solution. And that is the key to successful business on the continent, is provide a solution, not a product, not a service, but a solution. And I think that those are some of the areas that can be looked at. The entire energy transition, whether it's energy minerals, gas, and even some of the oil that's being unlocked at the moment, would be one area where I would see of that's attractive to us.
Right.
Well, just on that, Duncan, we at the AACC have actually created a MOU with the African Energy Chamber, and we have foreshadowed, which is something we've been discussing with Liz, a range of webinars in conjunction with them across this year. And I think that will be something that you'll be able to play a real role in complementing.
Yeah, just coming back to this energy story, I mean, I think that underpinning any development, or underpinning all development in Africa is energy. I mean, without energy, we can't do anything. And I mean, we're feeling that in Johannesburg today as we load shed. You know, without energy, you can't really go very far. So maybe Jason, I mean, this whole green hydrogen story as well that's starting to play out. I mean, for me, it's one of the more exciting developments on the continent at the moment. I don't know if you want to just comment briefly on the green hydrogen story.
Sure, Liz. There are a couple of really interesting developments in South Africa at the moment, and also Namibia in the region. We're seeing Sasol engaging in 3 quite significant green hydrogen projects at Sasolburg, Secunda, and Buchubai. We're seeing Enetrag having been procured by the government of Namibia in a project called Hyphen, which is for the production of green ammonia. Hive Energy from the UK has teamed up with Linda of Germany and Built Africa, a South African organization, to generate a large quantity of green hydrogen and green ammonia in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. And then finally, Anglo American is creating a hydrogen valley from the northern province of South Africa, going all the way down to the ports at Durban. This includes the production of green hydrogen for use in the logistics industry, its own logistics, including mining trucks, but also green hydrogen as an energy storage mechanism. So these are some of the quite significant green hydrogen opportunities that are being developed in South Africa at the moment. More broadly, the South African energy supply industry is in some trouble at the moment, with Eskom producing 90% of South Africa's energy, and it's being in the classic utility death spiral, as they call it, where it's unable to service all of its debt, it's unable to produce as much energy as South Africans need. Eskom is also a seller of power to our neighboring states, Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, and there's an energy exchange in a sense, with Mozambique also exporting especially hydropower into South Africa. So there is a regionalization through the Southern African Power Pool to make sure that the region is stable from an electricity supply industry. And one of the big changes in law that happened last year was enabling corporates to purchase their own private power. So coupled with corporates like big mining houses and industrials like Sasol needing to decarbonize their businesses, they've also been able to they're able to procure renewable energy, which ticks as multiple boxes of decarbonizing, giving them energy security at a lower price when combined with battery storage or gas. So we're seeing cell changes, and right now there's a new law that's being pushed for public comment in South Africa, the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill, which moves far away from where we are now, vertically integrated monopoly for energy supply in South Africa, to a decentralized willing buyer, willing seller market, which is precisely where South Africa and countries in our region need to be going. So these are very positive indicators of things to come, a very active private power market, and then the green hydrogen growth contributing overall to a just energy transition from this heavily coal-dependent economy in South Africa, and the same being true in a number of our neighboring states, into an energy supply industry that is more renewables-based and hopefully with a balanced grid. So looking forward into the future, I see a lot of exciting development in that area.
Jason, just on that renewable aspect, there is Bushveld Minerals there, which whilst it was originally a vanadium explorer, has now moved very solidly into the battery market and doing a really good job. Indeed, their vanadium flow batteries look set to become quite successful. Yeah. Among the other lithium-ion technologies that exist in batteries and other technologies still. So you're quite correct. Bushveld Minerals is making a big difference in that area.
So I see, Liz, you've got a chat program here, and there's 5 people that want to ask questions. Do you want to ask? It would like to hear off the chat section.
Yeah, I think that Boban Tomic has come through with a couple of questions, or a comment saying, I'm surprised Eskom still hasn't opened up the sector. But Jason, I think that you have addressed that in terms of how South Africa is starting to move into a willing buyer, willing seller kind of model on the power side. It's taken a while, but certainly we are moving in that direction. The other comment that we have was, again, from Bonnet, it says, aside from medicine education, where does the panel see opportunities for Australian enterprises? I mean, maybe that's something that we could end on just as a comment, get a comment both from Duncan and from Jason as to where they see the overall opportunity for Australia in Africa. Duncan, should we start with you?
Yeah, I think, you know, as we've heard from Hugh and Duncan, Australia's economy really is geared around services. Some of the services we haven't talked about would relate to the broader engineering industry. There is this myth that everything in Africa is built by the Chinese. And whilst China has a very strong presence in Africa, it doesn't necessarily flow that everything is done by the Chinese. If you look at companies like some of the other big EPCs out of Australia, they do very good business in Africa. And I think that's an area. And when I talk about engineering, I'm not only talking about civil engineering or mining project engineering, but the broader engineering sector. There is a chronic shortage of engineering skills in Africa. And I think that's something that really can be tapped into. Even in South Africa, in fact, you've probably got more engineers from South Africa in Australia than we have left here. So, it's something that we certainly do require across the continent, is those skill sets. And it goes to a broader level. And I think that is things like packaging projects. It's again a bit of a misnomer that there are no projects in Africa, and that there's some people say there are no projects, some people say there's no finance. Plenty of both. What there is a lack of is people who are able to package those projects to meet the requirements of both parties, the project developers and the financiers. And I think once again, there is that ability within Australia as a sort of a frontier nation and a nation that is willing to always engage and roll up your sleeves and say, well, how do we actually do this? How do we make this a viable project? I think that kind of service is something that in many African countries is lacking, is that ability to simply package projects correctly. And so we see a lot of that opportunity. Obviously, high-tech goods, we've mentioned that as well, and that would go across the value chains, whether it is in the broader agri-industrial value chain, whether it is in the extractives value chains, or in things like engineering, urbanization, and that kind of thing. And obviously, we've mentioned the broader education sector as it is. But I think that those are some of the areas where we see there could be a lot of value for Australian companies to start looking at how they could engage in the broader business environment across the continent.
I think, Jason, that's right. But you put your finger on what I mean. I've just come from today back from a what is the Australian Financial Review sort of annual conference, and what are they talking about? Is the shortage here of exactly the same people you're talking about. Quite frankly, it's basically this the concern that for many years, the world really hasn't focused on STEM education. And so it's not as if it's something that's come upon us just this week or last week. It's been graduating to, burden all of us. The amount of capital investment that's wishing to take place and the availability of STEM trend people, the right those with the IT skills, the project skills, the engineering skills. And I guess, many of it's been that they haven't been the focal point of social engagement because they have to be remote. You get dirty from time to time. Why would I want to get dirty when I can be in an office or something or other and be with my mates at the pub after work? It's something which the Western world's, I think, got a problem about. So there's a demand here for, I don't know how many zillion engineers. We're running out of even medicos right now. And there's a lot of discussion about how there's competition to try and get people to come back into the country. So I have no doubt that, South Africa's in the same boat, but it doesn't mean that we have a pool of experienced people. I mean, I don't know what the status of Worley Parsons is now, but I used to see them in parts of South Africa. Parts of the work I saw with them at that time was very good. They were very good at training local people. They also had a great pool of people that came from Australia and all around the world. The organization of gathering those skills, not necessarily from any one country, to be effective in Africa was very good. So you're right. There are opportunities. There must be opportunities in the African continent for doing that against the fact that it's a competitive market worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. Liz, I think there's a question here for you around agricultural testing. Liz has been working very closely in this sector for the last while. Nina Hjortland has said we provide value addition to agricultural products in Tanzania, but finding it hard to access reliable external quality testing required for export and sale. How do you go about situations like this? You can comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. And I mean, it's an Africa-wide problem, this complete and utter lack of testing capacity within the institutions that are so someone like the Tanzania Standards Authority, whatever, just really does not have the capacity. I mean, we're dealing at the moment with a project in South Africa or Southern Africa, where literally you're finding on things like cosmetics, where products are actually being sent to Ireland for testing and to European standard, and then being sent back here. And the additional cost to enterprises on the ground is just extraordinary, especially if you're a small enterprise that's trying to break into an export market. I mean, for me, on export and getting the requirement for export, the only people really to do that are the likes of the SGS of this world, Bureau Veritas, the international testing organizations. They're the ones who would be the ones that you would need to approach to get the testing done on, especially in agriculture, for export markets. Great. Okay, there's no more. You want to have your final say in terms of, Duncan, you had your final say. Jason, would you like to have a final comment?
I think to add to what Duncan said earlier about the opportunities for Australians, just that we'd be very pleased to support you in your endeavours in South Africa and Africa, and hopefully see many Australians doing well in the continent.
Thank you.
Well, Liz, I think we're almost coming towards the end of our 1 hour, and I thank you and your organisation that's been able to pull this together. I also thank Hugh for his participation. I'm sure this we'll be putting it up on our website and distributing it in the next day or so, of course, and we very much look forward to taking this forward with you, because it's a very exciting development, as we said at the outset. But again, thank you, Liz, for your participation with your team, and we really want to make it a success for both of us.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Jason, for joining us on the panel. It was lovely to have you, and to Duncan, always thank you. And we look forward to moving forward with the Australia-Africa Chamber of Commerce. I think that there's a lot of synergy between what you do and what we do, and we hope that in the coming months we see far more activity from Australia in terms of the African project environment. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you all those who attended.
Wonderful, thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Hugh.